A child's trembling hands, bloodied by a broken shovel, claw at the sun-scorched Arizona earth of 1877, driven by faint cries from a grave. Eli Harper, an 11-year-old orphan in tattered, colorful rags, forgotten by a harsh frontier town, stumbles upon a secret that could cost him his life. His courage unearths more than a buried warrior. It sparks a defiance that could reshape the desert's brutal heart. What hidden forces hunt this boy, and what legacy will his stand ignite? Subscribe now, share where you're joining us from, and uncover the astonishing end to this saga. Will justice prevail in a land that spares no one? Listen to find out. The Arizona sun of 1877 blazed like a furnace, scorching the cracked earth into a patchwork of red wounds. Eli Harper, a scrawny 11-year-old, trudged across the desolate plain, his worn boots kicking up dust that clung to his patched clothes, a motley quilt of faded colors stitched from scraps. Orphaned by a blacksmith father, lost to a brawl, and a mother vanished in a fever's grip, Eli was a ghost to the town, surviving on scavenged scraps and herding bony goats that nibbled at brittle sage. His green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the horizon for a stray kid, his only company the rasp of his own breath and the endless whine of the wind. A crow's scream sliced through the stillness, raw and urgent, jerking Eli's head toward a cluster of stunted mesquite. His heart thudded, a war drum in his narrow chest. The cry wasn't just a bird's, it carried a weight, like a warning carved in the air. He gripped the broken shovel slung over his shoulder, its splintered handle biting into his palm. Following the sound, his boots crunched over gravel, each step heavier, as if the desert itself whispered for him to turn back. The crow screeched again, circling a patch of ground where the earth seemed to pulse, unnatural and wrong. Eli froze, his breath catching like a snagged thread. A trail of drag marks scarred the dirt, jagged and dark with dried blood, not the clean tracks of a deer or the skitter of a coyote, but something heavier, deliberate. His knuckles whitened around the shovel's handle, the wood creaking under his grip. The trail led to a low mound, fresh and damp, bulging from the parched ground like a festering wound. The crow wheeled above, its cries a grim rhythm. Eli's stomach twisted, but his feet moved forward, drawn by a curiosity too fierce to smother, even as fear clawed at his gut. He knelt, dust coating his knees, and pressed an ear to the mound. A faint, ragged breath rasped beneath the earth, mingled with a weaker sound. A child's cry, thin as a dying breeze. His blood ran cold, but his hands moved before his mind could argue. The shovel's chipped blade bit into the dirt, each strike jarring his skinny arms. The ground was iron hard, baked by relentless heat, fighting back like a living thing. Blood welled from his palms, smearing the handle red, but Eli dug on, driven by the desperate sounds below. The crow's cries grew frantic, a metronome to his labor, as sweat stung his eyes and matted his sandy hair. The earth gave way slowly, each clod a grudging surrender. A man's face emerged, half buried, sun-scorched skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His lips, cracked to bloody slits, parted with a faint, "Water." Eli's breath hitched. This was Tahan, a Comanche warrior, beaten and bound, left for the vultures. On his chest, wrapped in a tattered hide, lay a baby, her face purpled from suffocation, her cries barely a whisper. Eli's hands shook as he dropped the shovel, fumbling for his battered canteen. He tipped it to Tahan's lips, water dribbling into the dirt, forming muddy rivulets. The warrior's throat worked weakly, swallowing what he could. Eli turned to the infant, Ahyoka, her tiny chest heaving. He tore the hide away, cradling her against his own pounding heart, his ragged shirt a poor shield against the desert's bite. "Don't die," he whispered, his voice raw, as if willing it could make it true. Tahan's eyes, glinting with pain and gratitude, locked on Eli's. But as the boy peeled back the hide, a glint of silver caught his eye. A ring, etched with the word, Eterna, rolled free from the dirt. It wasn't Tahan's, nor any trinket of the desert. Its weight felt wrong, like a key to a lock he couldn't see, hinting at a deeper shadow behind this grave. The sun climbed higher, its heat a hammer on Eli's back. He worked faster, freeing Tahan's bound arms, the ropes cutting deep into swollen flesh. The warrior stirred, his shoulders cracking the earth's grip. Eli's hands bled freely now, each movement a fire in his palms. But he didn't stop. The crow went silent, its black shape vanishing into the haze. The desert stretched endlessly around them, holding its breath. Eli glanced at the ring, now tucked in his pocket, its mystery a burr in his mind. He'd saved 2 lives, but that silver glint warned of a cost yet to come, a secret buried deeper than the grave he'd clawed open. Twilight bled over the Arizona plain, painting the sky in bruises of purple and ash, as Eli Harper knelt beside Tahan and Ahyoka, the silver ring in his pocket heavy with secrets, yet to unravel. The desert held its silence, but the air thrummed with the promise of trouble, a storm brewing beyond the horizon. The cracked earth stretched endlessly around them, a graveyard of scrub and bleached stone under the fading light. Eli's hands, raw and bloodied from digging, trembled as he cradled Ahyoka, her faint breaths a fragile thread against his chest. Tahan lay propped against a jagged rock, his chest rising shallowly, each inhale a defiance of the grave meant for him. The boy's green eyes darted to the horizon, where the crow had vanished, leaving only the weight of that strange ring. Eterna, burning in his mind like a coal. He didn't know its meaning, but it felt like a brand, marking him as part of something bigger, something dangerous. Eli scanned the plain for shelter, his heart pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. The nearest refuge was a crumbling shack, half a mile off, its warped boards sagging under years of neglect. Getting there meant moving Tahan, a 6-foot warrior reduced to a shadow by blood loss, and Ahyoka, too weak to cry. Eli set his jaw, looping Tahan's arm over his narrow shoulders. The warrior's weight nearly buckled him, but the boy's legs, wiry from years of scavenging, held firm. "Move!" Eli grunted, his voice sharp as flint. Tahan nodded, his boots dragging furrows in the dust, each step a battle against collapse. The trek was a gauntlet of heat and grit. Dust coated Eli's throat, each breath a dry rasp, while Ahyoka's warmth against his chest kept his focus razor sharp. The shack loomed closer, a skeletal outline against the twilight, but the plain wasn't empty. A faint rumble stirred the air, hooves, distant but closing, like the pulse of a predator. Eli's gut twisted. The Blackthorn Riders, the men who'd buried Tahan, weren't the kind to leave loose ends. He quickened his pace, Tahan's ragged breaths hot against his ear, urging them toward the shack's frail promise of cover. Inside, the shack was a ruin. Splintered walls, a dirt floor strewn with broken glass, the air thick with the scent of rot and old leather. Eli eased Tahan onto a pile of moldy sacks, the warrior's face etched with pain. Ahyoka whimpered, her tiny fists clutching Eli's shirt. He tore a strip from his patched sleeve, soaking it in the last dregs of his canteen to press against her fevered brow. Tahan's eyes, dark as obsidian, followed the boy's movements. "You're no coward, kid," he rasped, voice like gravel underfoot. Eli didn't answer, his fingers fumbling through his pocket for the ring, its silver glint a nagging riddle. Then he saw it, a scrap of paper tucked inside Ahyoka's hide wrap, missed in the frenzy of the grave. Unfolded, it bore words scrawled in red ink. "Kefan boy se hong thoat." The foreign script chilled him, not just for its threat, but for what it implied. A betrayal, a vendetta, a web stretching beyond the desert. Eli's breath caught, his mind racing. Who was Tahan to these men? And why mark a baby with such a curse? The paper crinkled in his grip, its weight as heavy as the ring, tying him to a fight he hadn't chosen. The hooves grew louder, a drumbeat of menace rolling across the plain. Eli peered through a crack in the shack's wall, spotting torchlight flickering like devil's eyes in the dark. Voices carried. Low, guttural, laced with menace. The Blackthorn Riders were here, their spurs clinking like coins in a gambler's hand. Eli clutched Ahyoka tighter, her warmth grounding him as he slid the paper into his pocket beside the ring. Tahan stirred, his bound hands twitching, testing the ropes Eli hadn't fully cut. The boy's pocket knife flashed, slicing the last cords, but Tahan's fingers closed around a hidden shard of metal, a broken blade, tucked inside his boot, glinting with grim purpose. A shadow loomed at the shack's door, the silhouette of Silas Blackthorn, his long coat pristine against the dust. His voice slithered through the dark, smooth as a snake's hiss. "Boy, you dug up trouble you can't bury." Eli stood, Ahyoka cradled in one arm, his other hand gripping the knife. The desert night pressed close, its silence a taut wire. Tahan's eyes met Eli's, a silent pact forged in the shack's gloom. The riders' torches flared brighter, their laughter a blade's edge, but Eli's green eyes burned with a fire older than his years. Whatever came through that door, he'd face it, not as a ghost, but as a boy who'd clawed life from death. The desert night coiled tight around the shack, its silence a blade's edge as Eli Harper stood with Ahyoka in his arms, his green eyes locked on Silas Blackthorn's shadow. The warrior Tahan poised with a broken blade, ready to meet the storm that rode in with the torchlight. The air inside the shack was thick with dust and dread, the warped boards creaking under the weight of impending violence. Eli's heart hammered, a frantic rhythm against Ahyoka's faint warmth, her tiny breaths a tether to his resolve. Silas Blackthorn stepped into the doorway, his long coat brushing the dirt floor, his revolver glinting like a rattler's fang in the torchlight. Two riders flanked him, their faces shadowed under wide-brimmed hats, hands resting on holsters. "Boy," Silas drawled, voice smooth as whiskey but cold as iron, "you've stirred a hornet's nest, digging up what we buried." Eli's grip tightened on his pocket knife, its blade a frail shield against the menace before him. Tahan shifted, his lean frame taut despite the blood seeping through his bandages. His broken blade caught the light, a jagged promise of defiance. Eli glanced at him, then back to Silas, his mind racing with the weight of the ring and the red-inked note in his pocket. "Kefan boy se kong thoat." The words burned, hinting at a betrayal deeper than a simple ambush, a vendetta that marked Tahan and Ahyoka as pawns in a game Eli couldn't yet see. The boy's throat was dry as the desert outside, but his voice cut through the gloom, steady as stone. "You don't scare me, mister. You buried a man and a baby. That's low, even for snakes." Silas's smile was a razor's edge, his eyes narrowing. "Bold talk for a runt in rags. This land's ours now, railroads coming, and strays like you don't get to stand in the way." He raised his revolver, the barrel a dark eye trained on Eli. The boy's legs trembled, but he stood firm, Ahyoka's weight anchoring him. Tahan's low growl broke the silence, his blade twitching like a coiled spring. The riders tensed, their fingers itching on their guns, the air heavy with the promise of blood. Then, a clatter outside. Rusty, Eli's scruffy mutt, bounded from the dark, teeth bared, slamming into one rider's leg. The man cursed, stumbling, his gun clattering to the dirt. Eli seized the moment, hurling a rusted tin can from the floor at Silas's face. It struck his cheek, drawing a snarl, and Tahan lunged, his broken blade slashing at the second rider's arm. The shack erupted in chaos. Grunts, the thud of fists, the crack of wood as a chair splintered under a falling body. Eli ducked, clutching Ahyoka, his knife slashing blindly at a hand reaching for him. The fight was a blur of dust and shadow, but the tide turned with a new sound. Hooves, not the riders, but heavier, steadier. Torchlight flickered through the shack's cracks, revealing silhouettes cresting the ridge. Harris, a grizzled ex-soldier who owed Eli's father his life, rode in with 3 townsfolk, their rifles gleaming in the firelight. "Blackthorn," Harris bellowed, his voice a thunderclap. "Step off or we'll bury you where you stand." The townsfolk, old Widow Crane with her scattergun, young Tom with a pitchfork, and a wiry trapper named Jess, fanned out, their faces hard with frontier grit. Silas froze, his revolver half raised, his men bloodied and faltering. Eli stood panting, Ahyoka's soft whimpers grounding him as he met Silas's gaze. "This ain't over," Silas hissed, his polished mask cracking. He backed out, his men limping after, their torches fading into the night like dying stars. Harris dismounted, his weathered face softening as he clapped Eli's shoulder. "You've got your paw's fire, kid." Eli nodded, his chest tight, the ring and note in his pocket a silent warning of battles yet to come. As the dust settled, Eli glanced at Tahan, who slumped against the wall, his blade still clenched. The warrior nodded, a silent debt forged in the fight. If this tale of a boy's defiance grips you, hit that subscribe button and share where you're listening from. It keeps stories like Eli's alive, carrying his fire across the plains. The shack stood quiet now, but the night held its breath, the ring's mystery and the note's threat looming like storm clouds. Harris and the townsfolk kept watch outside, their lanterns a frail shield against the dark. Eli tucked Ahyoka closer, her warmth a spark against the cold. He'd face death tonight, but the desert's secrets whispered of greater dangers, waiting to strike. 7 days had passed since the Blackthorn Riders' retreat, each one taut as a bowstring across the Arizona plain of 1877. The sun hung low, bleeding red across the cracked earth, casting long shadows from the shack's skeletal frame. Eli sat on a splintered crate, Ahyoka asleep in a makeshift cradle of burlap and sagebrush, her breath steadier now, a fragile victory against death. Tahan, his wounds scabbing under Eli's clumsy bandages, sharpened a stick with his broken blade, his eyes scanning the horizon for threats. The boy's hands, still raw from digging, toyed with the silver ring etched with Eterna, its mystery a burr under his skin. The note, Kepanboy se kong thoat, lay folded in his pocket, its red ink a silent accusation he couldn't shake. The shack had become a fortress of sorts, its walls patched with scavenged planks, a testament to Eli's stubborn grit. Harris, the ex-soldier, had stayed close, his rifle propped by the door, his weathered face etched with guilt for a debt to Eli's father he could never repay. Widow Crane brought dried meat and yarrow, her sharp eyes softening at Ahyoka's tiny form. Young Tom and Jess, the trapper, took turns patrolling the perimeter, their footsteps a faint rhythm against the desert's silence. Rusty, Eli's mutt, prowled the yard, his notched ear twitching at every gust. The community, once blind to the orphan boy, now saw him, a spark of defiance in a land that crushed the weak. Eli tended Ahyoka, crushing sage leaves to mix with water, a trick his mother taught before fever claimed her. The scent cut through the shack's musty air, grounding him as he dribbled the mixture into the baby's mouth. Tahan watched, his silence heavy with respect. "You've got a warrior's heart," he said, his voice low, like stones shifting in a dry creek. Eli shrugged, his green eyes flicking to the ring. "Just didn't want you dead," he muttered, but his mind churned. The ring and note hinted at a larger game. Railroad men, maybe, or something older, tied to the word Eterna. He'd heard whispers in town of a secret order, men who pulled strings from shadows, but he pushed the thought aside. Survival came first. Midday brought a new sound, not the sharp clatter of hooves, but a deep, rhythmic thud, like the earth itself breathing. Eli scrambled to the shack's roof, his boots slipping on warped boards, and peered out. A line of riders crested the ridge, their horses lean and swift, dust rising like smoke. Comanche, their braids catching the wind, moved as one, led by an elder whose buffalo hide cloak gleamed in the sun. His face was carved like canyon stone, eyes deep with years. Eli's heart quickened, not with fear, but awe. He slid down, calling to Tahan, who stood, his stick now a makeshift spear, his wounds forgotten in the moment. The riders halted 100 yards out, their horses snorting, manes rippling. The elder dismounted, his silvered braid swaying, and raised a hand. Tahan stepped forward, his voice steady. "Tsai," he said, a greeting that carried the weight of kin. The elder's gaze swept over Eli, lingering on the boy's tattered clothes and bloodied hands, then to Ahyoka, sleeping in her cradle. "A child defied death," the elder said, his voice a drum across the plain. "Comanche honor lives because of you." He gestured, and from behind, the riders came a thunder of hooves. 85 cattle, their coats gleaming black and dun, a tide of muscle stolen by the Blackthorn Riders, now reclaimed. Eli's breath caught, his eyes wide as the herd surged forward, their bellows shaking the earth. The elder knelt, eye level with the boy, his gaze warm as a fire's glow. "You gave us back a warrior and his child," he said. "These cattle carry our soul." He pressed a carved hawk pendant into Eli's hand, its wings etched with care. Eli's fingers closed around it, his throat tight. The Comanche turned, their horses wheeling, and rode into the dusk, leaving the herd behind, a gift that marked the plain. As the sun sank, painting the sky in fire and shadow, Eli stood among the cattle, their breath warm against him. Tahan nodded, his strength a quiet promise. The shack, once a ruin, now hummed with life, but the ring and note in Eli's pocket whispered of a reckoning still to come. The sun rose harshly on the 8th day, its light carving sharp shadows across the Arizona plain. Eli Harper, no longer just a ghost in rags, stood outside the shack, his green eyes tracing the hoofprints of the Comanche herd. Ahyoka slept inside, her cradle now lined with soft hides gifted by Widow Crane, her breath a quiet rhythm of survival. Tahan, his strength returning, leaned against the shack's door, his broken blade sheathed but ever ready, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the Blackthorn Riders had vanished. The cattle, 85 strong, grazed in a loose circle, their presence a wall of muscle around the fragile outpost. Rusty, Eli's mutt, trotted among them, his notched ear alert, as if sensing the weight of what lingered in the desert silence. The town, once blind to Eli, now buzzed with his name. Traders and trappers carried the tale. A boy, barely 11, had clawed a warrior and his child from a grave, faced down killers, and earned a Comanche elder's respect. The shack, patched and sturdy now, stood as a beacon of defiance, its walls marked by the community's hands. Harris's nails, Jess's planks, Tom's ropes. But Eli's mind wasn't on glory. The silver ring, etched with Eterna, and the red-inked note, "Que fan boy se quong thoat," gnawed at him. He'd overheard Harris muttering about a shadow syndicate, Men who branded their power with that Latin word, tied to the railroad's iron grip. The note's threat felt personal now, as if Eli's act of mercy had painted a target on his back. He tended the cattle at dawn, their warm breath clouding the cool air, his hands still sore but steady as he checked their brands. Some bore the Blackthorn mark, a slashed circle, proof of the rider's theft. Eli's fingers traced the hawk pendant, its edges sharp against his calluses. Tahan joined him, moving with a limp but taller now, his presence a quiet anchor. "You've changed this land," Tahan said, his voice like gravel smoothed by a river. Eli shrugged, kicking a clod of dirt. "Just did what was right," he muttered, but his eyes flicked to the ring in his pocket, its weight a question he couldn't answer. By midday, a new tension gripped the plain. A lone rider appeared, not a Blackthorn, but a wiry man in a dusty coat, his horse gaunt from hard miles. He carried a satchel, its leather stamped with a faint Eterna seal. Eli's gut clenched as the man dismounted, his eyes scanning the shack with a predator's calm. "You're the boy," he said, voice low, handing Eli a sealed letter. "Don't open it yet. Wait for dusk." Before Eli could speak, the rider was gone, his horse's dust trail swallowed by the heat haze. The letter felt heavy, its wax seal bearing the same Latin mark as the ring. Tahan's eyes narrowed, his hand on his blade. "Trouble follows you, boy," he said, not unkindly. Dusk brought answers. Eli broke the seal under the shack's lantern, Tahan and Harris at his side. The letter, inked in precise script, named Tahan, a traitor to a deal struck with the railroad, a deal to trade Comanche land for peace, broken when Tahan fought back. The note in Ahyoka's rap was a warning to others, but Eli's rescue had upended their plans. The syndicate, Eterna, wanted Tahan dead, and now Eli was in their sights. "They'll come again," Harris growled, his rifle gleaming. Eli's jaw tightened, the hawk pendant a talisman in his fist. He wasn't running. The community rallied, their lanterns dotting the plain like fireflies. Widow Crane boiled yarrow, Jess sharpened stakes, and Tom scouted the ridge. Eli stood among the cattle, Ahyoka's cradle nearby, her soft coos a reminder of why he'd fought. Tahan carved a new spear, his eyes meeting Eli's with a warrior's respect. The boy, once invisible, was now the heart of a stand that bound them all. Comanche, townsfolk, and a mutt who'd never leave his side. The desert stretched endlessly, its red earth stained with their defiance. As night fell, Eli clutched the pendant, the ring, and the letter. Silent but heavy. The syndicate's shadow loomed, but Eli's fire burned brighter, a legacy forged in courage that the Arizona plain would never forget. The Arizona plain holds its breath, Eli Harper's courage echoing through its red dust, a boy's defiance binding a warrior, a child, and a community against a shadowed threat. What did Eli's stand stir in you? Drop your thoughts below. Your voice keeps these tales alive. Gratitude to you all for riding this trail with us, for standing with a boy who clawed life from death. The frontier's pulse still beats, and we'll meet again with more stories of grit and heart. Until then, keep the fire burning and the horizon in sight. Join us next time for another journey through the wilds.